The message came on a Tuesday. Scientists at the Deep Space Listening Post in Nevada detected it first. A signal, clearly artificial, originating from the vicinity of Saturn. By Wednesday, the entire world knew that humans were not alone in the universe. It was the year 2047. Humanity had just established its first permanent base on Mars and was planning mining operations on the asteroid belt. No one expected visitors so soon. The aliens called themselves the Varaxians. Their first messages were simple mathematical sequences, followed by basic pictograms. Within 3 weeks, Earth computers had cracked enough of their language to establish basic communication. "We need to send our best," said President Garner in her address to the United Nations. "This is humanity's one chance to make a good first impression." John Miller sat in his Washington apartment watching the address with a glass of bourbon in his hand. At 52, John had negotiated peace deals in 6 global conflicts and had a reputation for breaking rules to get results. When his secure phone rang, he wasn't surprised. "Ambassador Miller," said the voice of the Secretary General, "how would you like to meet some aliens?" 3 months later, John stood on the observation deck of the U.S. Horizon, Earth's most advanced spacecraft. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the massive space station orbiting Jupiter's moon Europa, the neutral meeting ground suggested by the Varaxians. "Nervous, sir?" asked Lisa Hayes, his deputy. At 38, Lisa had spent her career studying theoretical models of alien communication. Now her theories would be tested. "Not nervous," John replied, straightening his formal blue uniform. "Just ready to get started." The diplomatic team gathered in the briefing room. Besides John and Lisa, there was Henry Clark, a bearded cynobiologist who couldn't stop fidgeting with excitement; Olivia Martinez, a cultural specialist who had spent weeks memorizing the limited information they had on Varaxian customs; and Kevin Wright, their communications expert who had helped develop the translation algorithms. "Remember," John said to his team, "we represent all of humanity today. The Varaxians are known to be formal and cautious. They value proper protocol above all else. According to our information," Olivia added, "they've been part of a galactic community for centuries. They're experienced at first contact scenarios. We're not." The shuttle journey to the space station took 40 minutes. No one spoke much. As they docked, Kevin adjusted the universal translator devices they each wore on their wrists. "These should work," he said, "but expect gaps and misunderstandings." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Beyond it stood 3 Varaxians. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with iridescent scales covering their slender bodies. Each had 4 arms and stood perfectly still, their large, faceted eyes blinking in perfect unison. They wore elaborate harnesses covered in small devices and symbols of rank. "Greetings, representatives of Earth," said the middle figure, its voice translated through the human's devices, with only a slight delay. "I am High Emissary Zerkstega of the Unified Varaxian Confederacy. We welcome you to neutral space." John stepped forward, offering the bow at precisely the angle they had been instructed was appropriate. "High Emissary, I am Ambassador John Miller of Earth. We are honored by this historic meeting." The alien scales shifted color slightly, from blue to purple. The team had been told this indicated positive emotion. "You have followed correct greeting protocol," said Zerkstega. "This is favorable." The human team was led through pristine corridors to a large circular chamber. The walls displayed shifting images of what they assumed were Varaxian landscapes, strange forests with crystal trees and purple skies. "We have prepared a formal introduction ceremony," said one of the other Varaxians. "It will allow proper cultural exchange within acceptable parameters." John smiled, already finding the rigid formality tedious. He had always preferred casual conversation that hit to the heart of matters quickly, but he nodded respectfully. "We would be delighted," he said. As they took their assigned positions around a large table, John caught Lisa's eye. She looked concerned. He gave her a reassuring wink. After all, How hard could it be to follow a few alien customs? He had no idea that within days, his approach to diplomacy would throw the entire galactic community into chaos. The first 3 days of meetings with the Viraxians went better than expected. The aliens spoke in precise, measured sentences. They never raised their voices or showed strong emotions. Every statement followed what they called proper diplomatic sequence. John found it exhausting. Each morning began with a 40-minute greeting ritual. The Viraxians would recite their titles and honors. The humans would respond with carefully rehearsed phrases. Only then could actual talks begin. They're like living robots, John whispered to Lisa during a brief recess on the 4th day. They stood in a small side room, drinking water from strange curved containers. They're not robots, Lisa said. They're just different. I've been watching their eye movements. They communicate a lot through subtle signals we might miss. John shrugged. Well, I think they need to loosen up a bit. All this formality is getting us nowhere. Back in the main chamber, High Emissary Zerkstka announced a special event. Tomorrow evening, we will host the ceremony of mutual understanding. The alien said, scales shifting to a deep blue color. This is a great honor. Few species are invited to this ritual so early in diplomatic relations. We are deeply honored, John replied, using the formal phrase Olivia had taught him. Later, in their private quarters aboard the Horizon, the team gathered to prepare. The ceremony of mutual understanding is extremely important, Olivia explained. It's mentioned in several transmissions we intercepted between the Viraxians and other species. It appears to be a turning point in their diplomatic process. Henry was examining the data on his tablet. According to my analysis of their biology, the changing colors of their scales might be involuntary. It could be their equivalent of facial expressions. That's right, Lisa said. I've been keeping notes. Purple seems positive, red seems negative, and green might indicate confusion or curiosity. Kevin added, their language patterns are becoming clearer too. They never use metaphors or jokes. Everything is literal. John listened while pacing the room. So what exactly happens at this ceremony tomorrow? It's a formal dinner, Olivia said. There will be specific foods, specific conversation topics, and ritual exchanges of information. We need to follow their lead precisely. John stopped pacing. You know what I think? I think we've been too cautious. These aliens reached out to us. They want to know who we really are. Maybe we should show them. Lisa looked concerned. John, I don't think that's wise. We should stick to the protocols they expect. Trust me, John said with a smile. I've been doing diplomacy for 30 years. Sometimes you need to break from script to make real progress. The next evening, the human team arrived at the ceremonial chamber. The room was dimly lit with strange blue lights. A large circular table held various containers with exotic foods and drinks. The Viraxians stood in perfect formation, wearing new harnesses covered in glowing symbols. High Emissary Zerkstka stepped forward. We welcome our Earth friends to the sacred ceremony of mutual understanding. This ritual has been performed unchanged for 20,000 years. John stepped forward. Instead of giving the expected formal response, he smiled broadly. Thank you, High Emissary. On Earth, we also have traditions of breaking bread together. Where I come from, we believe that real friendship begins when we can relax and be ourselves. The Viraxian scales flickered rapidly between colors. Lisa recognized this as confusion or possibly alarm. Throughout dinner, John continued his casual approach. He told jokes. He asked personal questions about Viraxian families. He even suggested they skip some of the more elaborate ritual phrases to save time. Henry, excited by the unusual foods, began examining and scanning everything with his portable devices before eating, not realizing this violated Viraxian meal customs. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere had changed. The Viraxians answered questions with shorter replies. Their scales had settled into a dull reddish hue. I think we made real progress tonight, John said as they returned to their ship. They're starting to see we're not just protocol-following machines. Only Lisa seemed worried. I'm not sure they see it that way, she said quietly. I think we may have just made a terrible mistake. She was right. The real trouble would begin the very next day. The morning after the ceremony of mutual understanding, no Varaxians came to meet the human team. They waited in the main meeting chamber for 2 hours. Something's wrong, Lisa said, checking her translator device for the 3rd time. This is not in the schedule they provided. John shook his head. They're probably just running late or having some internal discussion. Just then, a single Varaxian entered. It was not High Emissary Zerkstka, but one of the junior diplomats. A High Emissary sends regrets, the alien said stiffly. Today's meetings are postponed for reflection. Before anyone could ask questions, the Varaxian left. Reflection? Henry asked. What does that mean? It means we messed up, Lisa said. I told you they were uncomfortable last night. John stood up. No, this is just a minor setback. I've seen this in human diplomacy too. They're testing us, seeing how we react to a change in plans. Later that day, John called his team to the Horizon's conference room. I have a new plan, he announced. We've been playing by their rules this whole time, but they came to meet us because they're curious about humans. So let's show them who we really are. What exactly are you suggesting? Kevin asked. A party. A real human gathering. Music, food, games, the works. We'll invite the Varaxians to experience authentic human culture. Lisa immediately objected. That's a terrible idea. They were clearly disturbed by our behavior at their ceremony. Making things even more casual could be disastrous. I disagree, John said firmly. Look, in 30 years of diplomacy, I've learned that sometimes you need to shake things up. Formal meetings only get you so far. Real connections happen in relaxed settings. Despite Lisa's concerns, John's plan moved forward. The crew of the Horizon transformed one of the larger rooms into a party space. They set up earth foods, music from various cultures, and even simple party games. The invitation was sent to the Varaxian delegation, carefully worded as a cultural exchange opportunity. To everyone's surprise, they accepted. That evening, 6 Varaxians, including High Emissary Zerkstka, arrived at the Horizon. They stood rigidly just inside the entrance, their scales flickering between green and red as they observed the scene. Welcome to an Earth-style gathering, John said, approaching them with a warm smile. Please, make yourselves comfortable. Try the food. Listen to the music. The aliens moved cautiously into the room. They observed everything with intense focus, but participated minimally. They hate this, Kevin whispered to Lisa. Look at their scale coloration. I know, Lisa replied. We should end this now. But John was already leading High Emissary Zerkstka toward a table with drinks. On Earth, we have a tradition of toasting to new friendships, John explained, offering a glass of mild wine to the alien diplomat. Zerkstka hesitated, then accepted. We will observe your customs, the alien said. What John didn't know, what none of the team knew, was that alcohol affected Varaxian biology very differently than humans. Within 20 minutes, High Emissary Zerkstka's behavior changed dramatically. The alien's formal speech patterns dissolved. Its movements became erratic. Your species is classified as potentially dangerous, Zerkstka suddenly announced loudly. But I will tell you a secret. The Meldorians think you might be useful. The other Varaxians froze in alarm. The Galactic Council has 17 voting members, Zerkstka continued, scales now flashing wildly. 3 of them wanted to quarantine your solar system. Did you know that? A junior Varaxian rushed to Zerkstka, trying to guide the High Emissary away from the humans. This information is classified, the junior diplomat hissed. Too late, John realized something was terribly wrong. I think we should end the evening, he said. But the damage was done. The High Emissary was revealing galactic secrets in front of shocked Viraxians and equally shocked humans. Worse still, one of the Horizon's crew members was recording the entire incident on his personal device, a clear violation of the diplomatic protocols. Within hours, the recording would spread throughout both vessels. Within days, it would reach Earth and the Viraxian homeworld. The diplomatic incident was just beginning. 2 days after the party disaster, the Viraxians sent a short message. They were leaving. All diplomatic talks were suspended. The space station would be closed within 24 hours. "This is unprecedented," Olivia said as the team gathered in the Horizon's command center. "They're not even following their own diplomatic exit protocols." "Can you blame them?" Lisa asked. "Their lead diplomat got drunk and revealed classified information because we ignored their customs." John sat silently, reviewing the situation reports. The recording of High Emissary Zerxka's meltdown had already reached Earth. Government officials, news networks, and social media were all buzzing with talk of other alien species and a galactic council. "The president wants us back immediately," he finally said. "We're being recalled." As the Horizon prepared to leave Europa's orbit, something unexpected happened. 5 different signals were detected, all directed at Earth. They came from different parts of space. All carried the same basic message. Planned diplomatic missions to Earth were now canceled. "We've scared them off," Kevin said, analyzing the signals. "These must be other alien civilizations that were watching our first contact." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. It was a quiet trip. The crew avoided John. His team spent most of their time preparing reports and explanations for the inquiry they would face. Only Lisa still spoke to John regularly. One evening, she found him in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "You know what the worst part is?" he said without turning around. "I actually thought I was helping. I've spent my whole career breaking the rules when necessary. It always worked before." "This wasn't like negotiating with other humans," Lisa said gently. "We were given protocols to follow. There were reasons for them." When they arrived at Earth, the situation had grown worse. The Viraxians had sent a formal complaint to world governments. They had also shared information about something called the Galactic Species Database. Humanity had been labeled as protocol violators, a serious designation that would affect all future contacts. The inquiry took place at the United Nations headquarters in New York. John and his team faced a panel of government officials, scientists, and diplomacy experts. Ambassador Miller, the lead investigator, said, "Did you deliberately ignore the cultural briefings you were given?" "No," John replied firmly. "I made a judgment call based on my experience. I believed a more personal approach would build better relationships." "Your judgment call has potentially damaged humanity's standing among intelligent species across the galaxy," the investigator said. Later that day, Olivia presented her findings to the panel. "I've analyzed everything we learned about galactic diplomacy," she explained. "Most spacefaring species evolved in environments that required extreme cooperation and rule-following. Their societies value predictability above all else." She displayed charts comparing human and alien diplomatic approaches. "Humans value flexibility, creativity, and personal connection in our negotiations. But for most galactic species, these traits are seen as dangerous and chaotic. What Ambassador Miller did was actually frightening to them." The next revelation came from a new transmission from the Viraxians. A formal statement had been issued by the Galactic Diplomatic Council. Kevin translated it for the panel. "Human diplomatic methods are deemed high risk. Direct contact with human representatives requires special preparation and containment protocols. Standard diplomatic immunity provisions are suspended for human envoys." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. "So that's it?" John asked. "The whole galaxy is now afraid to talk to us because I threw a party." The panel chair looked grim. "It appears so, Ambassador. The question now is, how do we fix this mess?" Before anyone could answer, an aide rushed into the room with an urgent message. Another alien signal had been detected. This one was different. It came from a species called the Navorians. They wanted to meet with humans. Specifically, they were requesting John Miller. 6 months after the Europa disaster, a strange ship entered Earth orbit. It looked nothing like the precise, geometric Varaxian vessels. This ship had curves and odd bulges, with swirling patterns across its hull that seemed to change color constantly. The Navorians had arrived. "I don't understand why they asked for me specifically," John said as he stood in the preparation room at the newly built Lunar Diplomatic Center. "I'm the last person who should be talking to aliens again." Susan Baker, the veteran diplomat chosen to lead the new mission, gave him a stern look. "You're here as an advisor only, Ambassador Miller. You will observe and provide input when requested. You will not speak directly to the Navorians unless I give permission. Is that clear?" John nodded. After months of being blamed for humanity's galactic embarrassment, he knew better than to argue. The new team was carefully selected. Besides Susan, there was Daniel Green, a cultural anthropologist with multiple languages, Samuel Ross, a protocol officer with military precision, and Grace Abbott, who had spent the last 6 months studying everything known about galactic diplomacy. "The Navorians are different," Grace explained during their final briefing. "According to what the Varaxians accidentally revealed, the Navorians are considered unusual even by galactic standards. They're known as risk-takers." "Then why did they want me here?" John asked. "I'm the biggest diplomatic risk of all." "That's exactly why," Susan replied. "They requested you by name. We just don't know their reasons yet." The meeting took place on the Navorian ship. Unlike the sterile, orderly Varaxian station, the Navorian vessel was a riot of colors, sounds, and strange smells. The walls seemed alive, shifting and pulsing with patterns. The Navorians themselves were equally surprising. While the Varaxians had been tall and rigid, the Navorians were short, round creatures with 6 limbs that seemed to move in constant motion. Their skin changed colors like an octopus, and they made musical chirping sounds even when not speaking. "Welcome, humans," the lead Navorian said through a translator device. "I am First Explorer Curie. We are most pleased to finally meet you face to face." Susan stepped forward and gave the formal greeting they had prepared. The Navorians listened politely, but John noticed they seemed almost bored by the formality. When Susan finished, First Explorer Curie approached John directly. "You are John Miller, yes, the one who broke the Varaxian High Emissary." John winced at the phrasing. "I made mistakes in our first contact situation." "Yes." Curie made a strange bubbling sound that the translator identified as laughter. "Mistakes. Yes, wonderful mistakes. That is why we are here." The Navorians led them to a circular room with comfortable seating arrangements. As they settled in, Curie explained their interest. "We have been watching your species for many decades. You humans are fascinatingly unpredictable. Most galactic species evolve from group-minded creatures or hive structures. Their diplomacy is based on perfect predictability and rule-following." Samuel Ross nodded. "We've learned that our approach to diplomacy is considered chaotic by galactic standards." "Exactly," Curie chirped happily. "And that is precisely what makes you valuable. The galactic community has become stuck in patterns thousands of years old. Problems that could be solved with fresh thinking remain unsolved because no one will break protocol." John leaned forward. "So you're saying our diplomatic weakness could actually be a strength?" "Yes, yes." Curie's skin flashed bright yellow. "The Varaxians were wrong for you as first contact. They are the most rigid rule followers in the galaxy, but we Navorians appreciate the unexpected." Daniel Green asked, "If most species fear our unpredictability, why don't they fear yours?" "Because we are predictably unpredictable," Curie replied. "We follow our own strange rules. You humans follow no consistent pattern at all. It is terrifying and wonderful." As the meeting continued, John remained quiet as instructed, but his mind raced with possibilities. For the first time since the disaster, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't ruined after all. Maybe they just needed to find the right role to play. The second day of meetings with the Navorians revealed even more surprises. First, explorer Curie took the human team on a tour of their ship, showing technology that seemed almost magical. "Our ship runs partly on mathematics and partly on music," Curie explained, leading them into what appeared to be an engine room. Instead of machinery, there were strange crystalline structures that hummed with complex tones. Susan followed diplomatic protocol perfectly throughout the tour, asking careful questions and making appropriate comments. John stayed back as instructed, observing silently. During lunch in a garden-like room filled with plants from dozens of worlds, Curie approached John directly. "You are very quiet today, John Miller. This is not like the human who broke all protocols with the Varaxians." John smiled slightly. "I've been ordered to observe only." "Ah, so humans can follow rules when properly motivated by failure," Curie said with a musical laugh. "Interesting." After lunch, the real purpose of the Navorian visit was finally revealed. The group gathered in a meeting room where Curie activated a holographic display showing a star map. For the past 300 years, two civilizations in the Orion sector have been locked in a territorial dispute, Curie explained. The Pelax and the Durrani are both highly logical species. They have tried to resolve their conflict using standard galactic diplomatic protocols. They have failed. "What does this have to do with us?" Susan asked. "We believe human unpredictability could break the deadlock," Curie said. "Our proposal is this. Earth will train a special group of diplomats who specialize in creative problem-solving. When standard galactic diplomacy fails, humans will be called in." The team was stunned. This was the opposite of what they had expected after the Varaxian disaster. "You want us to break protocols, on purpose?" Daniel asked. "Exactly." Curie's skin flashed bright patterns of excitement, but within carefully defined limits, of course. No one wants another incident like with the High Emissary. As they discussed the details, an emergency alarm suddenly blared throughout the ship. The lights dimmed and strange symbols flashed on the walls. "What's happening?" Susan asked, maintaining her calm diplomatic demeanor. Curie's skin turned a deep blue. "Ship malfunction. The gravity stabilizers are failing. Standard emergency protocols have been activated." Two other Navorians rushed in, speaking rapidly in their own language. Curie responded with sharp musical tones before turning back to the humans. "We must evacuate this section immediately. Please follow the illuminated path to safety." The team followed the glowing lines on the floor. John noticed the Navorians seemed distressed, but were following very specific procedures, checking devices and reporting readings in sequence. As they reached a junction, John stopped. "Wait, something's wrong." Susan turned sharply. "Ambassador Miller, this is not the time to interfere." John pointed to a display on the wall showing the ship's layout. "The path they're taking us on leads away from the evacuation pods. And look at these energy readings." Grace stepped closer to the display. "He's right. The problem isn't where they think it is." Despite Susan's protests, John approached Curie. "Your protocols are sending you in the wrong direction. The problem is in Section 7, not Section 4. Curie hesitated, scales flickering with uncertainty. "Our emergency procedures are very clear." "And they're wrong this time," John said firmly. "Trust me." Human intuition. After a moment's hesitation, Curie gave orders to check Section 7. Within minutes, the real problem was found and fixed. The emergency ended. Later, in a debriefing, Curie was excited. "This is exactly what we hoped for. Your human ability to ignore established procedures saved precious time today." Susan looked at John with new respect. "I suppose sometimes breaking protocol is the right move." John smiled. "The trick is knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them." As they continued discussions into the night, a new idea began to take shape: a specialized human diplomatic service, unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. 1 year after the Navorian visit, the United Nations Space Diplomatic Corps headquarters buzzed with activity. The sleek building in Geneva housed a new kind of diplomatic service, one that had quickly become famous across the galaxy. John Miller stood at the window of his office, looking out at the snow-capped Alps. On his desk sat an unusual object, a small crystal sphere that glowed with shifting colors. It was a gift from the Palex and Durrani civilizations after human diplomats had resolved their 300-year conflict in just 2 weeks. There was a knock at his door. Lisa Hayes entered, carrying a data tablet. "How does it feel to be the head of the most unusual diplomatic service in history?" she asked with a smile. John laughed. "Still hard to believe. A year ago, I was the man who ruined humanity's first contact. Now we're getting requests from across the galaxy." "Speaking of requests," Lisa said, handing him the tablet, "we just received another one. From the Varaxians." John stared at the screen in disbelief. "The Varaxians? They specifically asked for us." "They specifically asked for you," Lisa corrected. "It seems they have a trade dispute with another species that has gone unresolved for decades. All standard protocols have failed." John shook his head in amazement. They must be desperate if they're willing to work with the diplomat who got their high emissary drunk. The past year had transformed humanity's place in the galaxy. With the Navorians' help, Earth had established what they now called the Diplomatic Disruption Service. When civilizations reached a deadlock that couldn't be broken by following normal galactic protocols, they could request human diplomats to intervene. The humans came with a warning label now. Before any diplomatic mission, all parties had to sign an agreement acknowledging that human methods might be unconventional. The standard notification across galactic communication channels was simple: human diplomatic methods in progress. Unpredictability expected. Most alien diplomats still avoided humans in social settings. At galactic conferences, there was always an empty space around the human delegation. No one wanted casual contact with such unpredictable beings. Yet more and more, they sought out humans for their unique abilities. Susan Baker, now Earth's representative to the Galactic Diplomatic Council, entered John's office. "The training program is going well," she reported. "We have 50 new diplomats learning when to follow protocols and when to break them." "And how is Samuel Ross doing?" John asked with a grin. "Still following every rule to the letter. Actually, he's become one of our best instructors on creative diplomacy," Susan replied. "He says understanding the rules perfectly is the first step to knowing when they should be broken." The door opened again as Daniel Green and Grace Abbott arrived for their scheduled meeting. They had just returned from a successful mission, resolving a scientific dispute between two hive-minded species. The secret was getting them to communicate through art instead of mathematics, Daniel explained. No one had ever tried that because it wasn't in any diplomatic protocol. As the team discussed their upcoming missions, John reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. One embarrassing diplomatic incident had nearly cut humanity off from the galaxy. Yet that same incident had revealed humanity's unique value. "We have a call scheduled with the Navorians in 10 minutes, Lisa reminded everyone. They want to discuss expanding the program. As they headed to the conference room, John noticed a group of alien diplomats watching them from across the hallway. The aliens whispered among themselves, keeping a safe distance. "They still think we're dangerous, don't they?" John asked. "Of course they do," Lisa replied with a smile. "We are dangerous to old problems and stuck thinking. To creative chaos," John said, raising an imaginary toast. To human diplomacy, the team responded together. And across the galaxy, alien civilizations continued to steer clear of human diplomats in social settings, while quietly adding their contact information for the next time they faced an impossible problem. Some things were worth the risk of a little human unpredictability.